Hello, everyone. This is Mai Vương for Caradoc, a PhD postdoc association based in University Paris-Saclay. Welcome to the Caradoc interview series in 2021, where we explore different career pathways for PhD graduates. Today, we will hear from Professor Jonathan Weitzman, professor in genetics in University of Paris. We will talk about the academic world in France and how it is to be a researchers and a university professors. Hello, Jonathan. Thank you very much for being our guest today. How do you feel right now?
Bonjour, Mai. Thanks very much for the invitation. Looking forward to talking to you.
All right, so let's get started. So first, would you like to introduce yourself to our listener and what has led you to science?
So my name is Jonathan Weitzman. I was born in England, and now I have had a long journey to end up in Paris, and I've been living here for the last 25 years. I came as a postdoc, and now I'm a professor and was director of a research institute.
So Jonathan, when did you become the professor in University of Paris?
So do you want me to talk about how I got to Paris? Is that?
No, just when in which year?
So I became a university professor about 15 years ago. Before that, I was at the Institut Pasteur. I was a member of the staff at the Pasteur Institute, and 15 years ago, I became a professor at the Université de Paris Diderot, which has become now the Université de Paris.
All right. So can you tell us currently what are the qualifications and the steps needed to become a professor in France?
Okay, how do you become a professor in France? So a professor is part of or has a status of what is called in French enseignant-chercheur, teacher, researcher. And there are two phases in the career of an enseignant-chercheur, of a teacher, researcher. One is a maître de conférence and the other is a professor. These are recruited a little bit differently. The maître de conférence would be like an assistant or associate professor, and a professor would be like a full professor in other countries. All these positions are tenured. They are jobs for life. So once you're recruited, basically, you can't lose your job for the rest of your career. And in order to become an enseignant-chercheur, you need to have both experience of research and experience of teaching. And you need to be able to show that you've done both of those well, and that you've done that you've really participated actively in those two activities, both teaching and researching. And one or the other is not enough. You really need to have done both.
So I know that to prove your research experiment, you need to get a degree called HDR.
That's yes. So that's an HDR is a French degree. So to be maybe I talk a little bit about the process, how you get recruited as a maître de conférence or as a professor. So in France, the recruitment is through a national competition, which is called a concours. And in order, it's very, very French. In order to apply, you have to have something called a qualification, which means that at the beginning of the year that you want to apply, you need to send your CV and your scientific background to the CNU, which is the national structure, and they will decide whether you are qualified in order to apply for the national competition. Okay, so you have to think about this like a year in advance, and you have to become qualifié. If you are not qualifié, you cannot even apply for the job. Okay, and the qualification lasts for 4 years. So once you get it, you can apply for the next 4 years. You are qualified to apply. The concours is a 15-minute presentation and 15 minutes of questions about your research and about teaching. So that's how, and this is a national competition, but there is only ever one job. So the committee will choose one person. Okay, they will rank the best candidates and they will choose just one for either maître de conférence or for professor position. Then your question about an ATER is in order to have students, graduate students, and in order to supervise graduate students, you need to have a special qualification, which is called an Habilitation à diriger les recherches. So like a qualification to be a PhD supervisor. And normally you get that when you've already been in the career for at least a decade, and you've already published, and you've already brought in money, and you've already supervised people. Then you go through again an exam with a thesis and a committee and public defense. And then if you succeed, which nearly everyone does, you can become a PhD supervisor. So everybody who supervises a PhD is supposed to have this ATER degree.
All right. So
that
to some
question, it's very, very French. I know in Germany they also have a type of system like that, but every country functions differently.
So in short, we need to have, to become a professor in France, you need to have both research experience and teaching experience.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing. So we will dive more into the system, the academic system in France and in comparison with other countries. So you just explained the best way of chercheur enseignant, which is researcher and teachers. I am a PhD student in France. I also have heard other terms like ATER or chargé de recherche or ingénieur. So can you explain to our audience like the overall system and the hierarchy of this academic position in France?
Okay, so the first thing is that the French, they love abbreviations. So anything that they can abbreviate will become an abbreviation. So the hardest thing when you come to France, I imagine you experience this yourself, is everyone talks in abbreviations and it's very hard to follow. So a ATER, which is what you just mentioned, is an attaché temporaire d'enseignement et de recherche, ATER. And basically it's a 2-year position where normally given to people who have finished their PhD or almost finished their PhD. It's like a postdoc with teaching. So you have half a teaching load and you're expected to do research as well. So it's like it's a bit like a transition between after the PhD, very much like a postdoc. So that's ATER. A maître de conférence, sometimes called MCF, MCF is maître de conférence, is a lecturer, what we would call in England a lecturer or a junior lecturer, what you might call in the States an associate professor or an assistant professor. These are people who have done a PhD and a postdoc, maybe 2 postdocs, and have a responsibility for both teaching and research. Okay, if you are a maître de conférence, you have a job for life, so you can be a maître de conférence all your career. But many maîtres de conférence hope 10 or 15 years later, or maybe more, maybe even 20 years later, to become a professor. Okay? And what were the other? And then you asked about chercheurs and enseignants-chercheurs. Every country has their own particular system. So an enseignant-chercheur are these maîtres de conférence and professor. They have an obligation to teach. They are supposed to teach at least 192 hours of classroom teaching a year. Okay, there's can be tutorials, lab works, all sorts of things, but 192 hours, which is quite a lot of teaching when you think that doesn't count all the marking and all the preparation. So to prepare an hour's class takes hours and hours of preparation. So that is their obligation, and then they're expected in the rest of their time to do research. At the same time, in parallel, we have a completely different system, which is the National Research Councils, the CNRS, again, an abbreviation, le Centre National de Recherche Scientifique, and INSERM, which I imagine is the Institut National de Recherche Médicale, something like that. Anyway, these are the National Research Councils, okay, the equivalent of NIH or the MRC. And they also recruit people as researchers with no teaching obligations for tenure jobs for life. These again have two levels. The CR or Chargé de Recherche is the entry level. And again, you can stay a Chargé de Recherche all your career. And then the senior level, which would be the equivalent of professor, is DR, Directeur de Recherche, okay? And again, all these jobs are given out on the basis of these national competitions, which they call a concours. In addition, in parallel, I'm sorry it's so complicated, but in parallel, we also have another track, which is an engineer track, okay, or what we used to call in the old days technicians, okay? These are people who have some scientific background. Some of them may have master's degrees. Some of them may even have PhDs, but they will not be running labs. They will be really technical and support in teams or in technology platforms. So there are more and more platforms, and some of these people may be international experts in their field, but they don't have the same responsibilities and they don't have the same career path. And again, they are recruited by a concours. They have a job for life. And again, there are different levels: ingénieur de recherche, ingénieur d'études, etc., etc. So these are the sort of, if you go into a lab anywhere in France, you will find all these different populations living together. Okay, you will see master students who are on short-term contracts. You will see PhD students who are there for 3 years, who are paid, who have a salary from the university for 3 years. You will see postdocs who are there from anywhere from 1 year to up to 5 years. And then you will see maîtres de conférence and professors, teachers and researchers. You will see chargé de recherche, directeur de recherche, CNRS and INSERM researchers, and you'll see engineers and technicians. And all these people, at the end of the day, they're all working together. Okay, they're all living together and working together, publishing together, and that's how teams are constructed. All teams, in most institutes, all teams will have all these people working together in the same building and in the same lab.
Okay, so in short, there are two main tracks for tenure position in France. One, it become researchers, which we call chargé de recherche or directeur de recherche, and you will need to go to public institution like CNRS or INSERM. The second one is we become chercheur enseignant, which is researcher and teachers, which is employed in the universities.
Exactly. Of course, this is France, so it's much more complicated than that, because, and I should say nearly everything I'm saying is from my experience in the life sciences, okay? So it may be a little bit different if you're in the humanities, it may be a little bit different, but from the outside, it looks very, very complicated, because in addition to all these, everything that we've just talked about, there are also some private foundations or institutes, like the Institut Pasteur, very famous institute in infectious diseases. It's been around for 150 years. They will house people from the CNRS and INSERM and the university, but they also have their own jobs. They have their own competitions and their own jobs. Another private institution that is very famous is the Institut Curie, the Curie Institute, which is dedicated to cancer research. And then we have INRA, which is agricultural. And then, so many layers of complicated. We have the Collège de France. It's an extremely complicated landscape. And I think that's, we're going to talk about how you navigate. The hardest thing about coming to France is understanding all these different layers and understanding all these abbreviations that are used to refer to all these layers. But at the end of the day, there are lots and lots of different ways to just do research in France.
So I suppose you have participated in a lot of recruitment process for all these positions. So could you already said about the recruitment process for maître de conférence or assistant professor, but regarding a candidate profile for assistant professor, what are the criteria that are highly recommended?
Okay, so what makes recruitment different from other countries is that everything is done through these national competitions, and these national competitions have a fixed calendar. Okay, so that an institute can only recruit once a year through these competitions. So you really have to be prepared. You have to respect the deadlines, and you have to be aware of what is going on. It is not like other countries where you can go and give a seminar and meet someone and they might want to bring you in because you have a particular expertise. It doesn't work like that. Everything is through these national competitions. So you have to be prepared. You have to make sure that your dossier is ready before, and everything. The deadlines are extremely strict, and nothing is negotiable. So that's the first thing. So in France, if you want to get recruited, you have to be prepared, and you have to be organized, and you have to have seen other people's applications. You have to have friends who will share their applications, so you see the style, the depth of the presentation, and all these things. And the first round of screening is based on the paper, on the written application. So the written application has to look right, has to feel right, it has to be that will be the first screen, even before you get through to the oral. Okay, normally to get through to the oral is already a big achievement to get to the oral, to the extent that some people will even put that on the CV that they didn't get the job, but they got to the oral exam, or they got classed classed third or fourth or fifth. Why did they do that? Because unlike other countries, it's relatively rare to get these jobs first time. So you may have to apply more than once, and you hope that the committee will have some memory of your application from the year before. So it is a big deal just to get to the interview. And the interview, again, you need to be coached. You need to have someone help you prepare for this. 15 minutes is a very short amount of time, and you need to get, every slide has to be right, every answer to every question has to be just right. It's extreme, and you don't get a second chance. You can't come back to the committee and say, I messed up, and what I meant to say was, you only get one 15-minute presentation. So the demands of the preparation, both for the written and for the oral, are very, very tough. And I think that's very different from other countries. In other countries, you might go for the interview and spend the day and talk to all the faculty, and it's really important who you are and how they like you and what you bring and how you complement the other. Here, they're just looking for scientific excellence. You need to be ready, and you need to be able to show. If your big paper hasn't come out yet, you won't get the job. So maybe you should wait for next year and make sure you're really ready for it. And you need to have people help you. You cannot do this by yourself. You need to have. So in the institute that I created and ran, we coach anyone for these jobs. The whole institute, all the PIs, all the group leaders, spend time coaching them, because you need to be coached through the process. And it's really, really tough. There are more good candidates than jobs. So if you didn't get it, it's not because you're not a good candidate. It's just because there was someone else who was even better than you. So you need to be psychologically tough because you need to prepare yourself the first year for rejection. So.
Thank you, Jonathan. So in the same line, can you share the view on the criteria for a candidate apply for chargé de recherche in CNRS?
Yeah, so at the CNRS and at the university, the committees are giving jobs for life. So they are looking for people who have demonstrated that they are going to make an important scientific contribution for the rest of their careers. So they're looking for people who are trained, but also who have shown that they can publish, that they can supervise, that they can give presentations, that they can teach. You need to be able to show all those things, and you need to, because it's very competitive, you need to show that you do those all to an excellent level. Okay, so they're looking for people who have good grades as undergraduates and as graduates. They're looking for people who made important contributions and that those contributions are published in good journals. The French are very attached to impact factors of journals. They're looking for international experience, that you have presented your work at international meetings, that you have collaborated with international groups, that you they're looking for people who have done a postdoc and done a good postdoc, and again published and presented during that postdoc. They're looking for people who have supervised, who have had some experience of supervising undergraduates, of teaching in different scenarios. That's what they're looking for. They're also looking for someone who's going to be a good colleague. Yeah, they're looking for someone who's going to be able to work with, someone who's good in teams, someone who presents nicely and presents well, and who listens to questions and answers them thoughtfully, and who looks honest and looks like a good colleague, and looks motivated and excited, and all these things. So they're looking for all of that at the same time, and they're looking at all the candidates one after the other. Every half an hour it's a new candidate, so you need to stand out from the others. Okay, you need to be excellent, but even more excellent than all the other people who are coming, and they'll be good. So it's a tough process.
So to sum up, you need to have a good publication record with a big paper. The jury are looking for international experience and a team player, and also a teaching experience.
Yeah, and lots. Yeah,
and
lots
all of this.
So what is important to remember is no candidate is excellent everywhere. Okay, every candidate has some weakness. They haven't published so many papers, or they haven't. So, and there are exceptions to all the rules. You can get a job without having done a postdoc abroad, or without having a paper in Nature, or without having much teaching experience. But you need to have a lot of these criteria.
The job is certainly demanding, but there must be some reason for it. So let's talk a little bit more about the environment in France. What do you wish you had known before about the professorship and the academic environment in France, briefly?
What would I have liked to have known before I came?
Yes.
Do you mean bad things or good things?
No, anything you wish that you was known before. Maybe there is no. Maybe there is nothing to.
No, the one thing. I mean, we all talk about it, but it's a very tough environment in France because the funding is very, very tight, and that is hard. It's endless. The request, the grant applications just like in many countries, is an endless process, and it's tiring. It never stops. You always begging or asking or proposing for money. So I knew that was the case, but I didn't realize. I mean, you the more you do it, the more you realize how exhausting it is to be always worrying about getting money.
So is there any particular benefit about working in France compared to other European countries?
There are lots of benefits of working in France. First of all, croissant and baguette. I mean, it's
yeah, for sure.
just amazing. it's an amazing country with wonderful art and wonderful museums and wonderful food. And so there are many aspects of just living in France, which you have in other countries, but France is, and particularly Paris, is just an amazing place to live. The other thing that is very unusual about France is the French are very, very attached to their vacations. So unlike other countries where you might have 2 weeks of vacation, the French, they really, really have vacations. These are holy in a normal environment. I know this year is unusual, but normally people will take 6, 7 weeks of vacation. The month of August, the university closes down and makes it very, very hard to run a lab because you can't order anything during August. Everyone wants to go away. But it does mean that the quality of life is high. The salaries in France are low on the whole, but the quality of life is high. One of the reasons that I came to France, so I could have gone anywhere, right? So there are several reasons. One is my wife is French. Secondly, I was living in the United States and I wanted to come back to Europe. And but also it was very important to me to live in a country where everyone has healthcare, where everyone has access to education. So there are many advantages just to living in France. Maybe to answer your question, what are the scientific advantages? The scientific advantages are that you have a job for life. So I don't have to worry about my salary. So I said I have to worry about bringing in money for the lab to do experiments, but I don't have to worry about my salary. And so I have a job for life. And this job security means that you can do riskier projects. You have amazing liberty, amazing freedom to explore whatever you want to do. And the job, and you own that job. So if you have a CNRS job and you decide to move to Marseille, you take your job with you. So there's amazing freedom that comes from this job security. The other thing is that because it's very, very hard to get a job and it's very hard to survive and funding is really tough, my colleagues are amazing. I'm surrounded by amazing scientists doing beautiful work in very difficult conditions. And to survive, you have to be really, really good and really motivated. And the level of motivation and of excellence in French research is fantastic. So it's wonderful to have great colleagues like that. So those are some of the advantages, but I could go on. I mean, I really think it's a great place to work. It's a very difficult environment, but it is. I think it's a great place to work. I've done some of my best work in France.
So in short, high risk and high gain.
Sorry?
High risk, high gain. It takes a great effort to do, but you gain a lot in France.
Yeah, the risk is. I mean, you don't take much of a professional risk when you become a researcher. It's very hard to get in, but once you're in, you have a very privileged situation. You have a job for life, which should allow you, at least on paper, or at least theoretically, to explore more ambitiously or more creatively.
So what criteria do you recommend a PhD graduate to consider when choosing a workplace, like an institution or university?
So in France?
Or a country in general for academia?
So when I was an undergraduate, when I was first doing my degree, I was recommended that you should look at 3 things when you choose your PhD. One is the project itself, so the scientific questions that's being asked, and that's really important because you're going to spend a lot of time in the lab. So the question has to be exciting. It has to be exciting to you, not even to the funders. It has to be exciting to you. The second is the people you work with. So the people who will supervise you, the way they ask questions, the way they structure their lab, and every lab is different. You need to go and visit and see every lab is different and works in a different way. And as I said, in France, we're lucky to have amazing colleagues. So you need to look at the people who you're working with. And the third thing is the environment. So, and this is the environment of the labs. So some labs are very well equipped, some labs are less well equipped. What are the technology platforms and the technology that's accessible to you? And then on a broader, also the city. So you can have an amazing project with an amazing person, but if it's in a city that you won't enjoy living in, then I don't think you should go there either. And you shouldn't be afraid to say that. So I came to France because my wife was French and I wanted to come to France. And then I looked for an institute that was right for me. I chose the Pasteur Institute, and then I looked for a lab that was right for me. And I was very lucky that I had both the mentor, the institute, and the environment that were right for me. And again, it's really, really personal. So I could tell you about my research project and I could get very excited, and you could say, that is not what I want to do. And that's great. It's okay. So it has to be, it's really, really personal. Some people like big labs, some people like small labs.
So we will talk more about being in academia. I think most of the PhD students, and I am also, we are attracted to the freedom ideality in academia. Can you share your opinion? How free is it? Isn't the research, especially for applied science, dependent a lot for the funding?
So freedom is a state of mind. Okay, it's not about it's not external. You feel as free as you come from the inside. So you can spend your time saying there are so many constraints in the system, or you can spend your time looking at how much freedom you have. So when you have a job for life, you can't lose your job. So that gives you amazing freedom in many ways. So one of the advantages of these national funding is that the CNRS, when they recruit you, is they don't tell you what you're going to have to work on for the rest of your life. They recruit you because they believe that you have great potential. So if this year you're doing single cell sequencing because that's the exciting thing to do this year, but in 10 years time it's something else, you can switch to something else. So and you must keep up with the field. And I switched. I think it's really important to switch field. I used to work on cancer and oncogenic signaling. Today we work on parasites and epigenetics, and I do that in an institute that doesn't work on parasites. So no one's telling me what I have to work on. At the same time, I understand that you made an allusion to funding. You can do whatever you want as long as you can fund it, attract people to work on it, and publish it. Okay. If you can't do those things, then you just won't be able to work. So you can feel as free as you want, but you're not going to be able to do the experiments you want to do. So but life is a compromise. You need to be able to bring in, if it's an exciting project, then you will attract people. If you attract good people, you will generate good results. If you generate good results, you will publish in good journals. And if you publish in good journals, you will attract money, and then the money will attract good people. And it's
go again and again.
Virtuous circle. So yeah.
But what about
again, France is extremely free about how people work. There are people in my lab who come really early, and there are people who come late. There are people who work weekends, and there are people who don't work weekends. There are people and anyone wants to take vacation when they want. It's very hard to tell someone you can't take vacation. So you can feel very free as long as you can justify what it is you're doing and why you're doing it and why it's important and why it should be done and why it should be funded and why it should be published.
Right. So talking about publish, what are your opinion about the stigma of academia, public or Paris? What can the people like the young generation, like PhD students, do to avoid it?
So again, if you don't publish, then you won't attract people and you won't attract money. And if you don't have money and people, you can't test your ideas, and so you won't be able to. So you'll perish if you won't. At the same time, I and many of my colleagues feel very strongly, if we are asking the government to give us money to test our ideas, which is an amazing privilege to be paid by other people. I'm paid by the government, and most of the work in my lab is paid by the government or by charities. I have an obligation to discover things and to give back. So publishing is about sharing. If you don't share, then it hasn't been worth anything. If you have a discovery, you should want to share it. You should want to give talks. You should want to write papers. You should want to. So publishing is part of sharing, and sharing is part of being a scientist. So publishing is really, really important. Then the scenario that you talked about is where you publish and how you publish. And this, again, is tough. But again, there are many places to publish. There are too many journals, and there are lots of ways to publish. We, in biology, we are very attached to the ranking of the journals and the importance of publishing in what we call high impact factor journals or high impact journals, because the higher the impact, the more people will read it, and the more contribution you make to the field, and the more it will be cited, etc. So there is a little bit of this obligation to publish or perish, but I think it's normal. It's part of the job. You should want to publish because you should want to share, because you have something to say. You have to. It's an amazing arrogance to say that I want people to give me money so that I can find something, and I have something to say, something that I believe people should want to hear or should want to read. So if that's what you feel, you have to go all the way through and publish. So.
Thank you, Jonathan. So you mentioned that you don't need to worry about the salaries when you get the position. How do the salary in academia compare to industry? And besides the main payment from the government, is there any other source of salaries?
So I did say salaries in France are not really negotiated. They're dependent on your experience. So the further you are in your career, the higher the salary. But those salaries, you can find them online. They're on the site of the Ministère de l'Éducation. You can see the grades. Everything is on a graded scale. In industry, you can negotiate your salary, and to attract, industries offer slightly better salaries. I don't think that they're not multiples better, but you can earn more if you go into industry. I think it would be fair to say, without stereotyping, that higher salary comes with a reduced freedom. You will probably be told, normally it makes sense, an industry has to be able to produce a product and sell that product. So you won't be able to just decide what you want to work on. You will have to work as part of a project, and that project can be started or stopped depending on an industrial or commercial rather than a scientific criteria. So there is less freedom, and industry is willing to pay more for that less freedom. Okay, again, this is not the case everywhere. That people have amazing, and people do have amazing careers, scientific careers in industry, but they're probably with less freedom. So salaries are a little bit higher, and probably to go through the ranks of industry, you need different types of criteria. You may need to get an MBA at some point, or you may or may not. So they have slightly different promotion criteria than we do in academia. Then you asked, are there ways that you can supplement your salary? So for many years, an academic in France was not allowed to supplement their salary, but the laws have changed. Today, some academics have started companies or on the boards of companies, and that may be a source of revenue. If you have a patent, if you protect your discovery from a patent, then you will receive some, and that patent makes money. Then you will receive, whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, you will receive some of that money. And then if you're a PhD student, you get paid to do the research. If you do some teaching, you can get paid a bonus. So there are some ways to get bonuses. based on additional things that you do. If you evaluate, sometimes if you're involved in the evaluation process, sometimes you get paid for that. If you work for the HCRS, you get paid for that. But we do a lot of things for free. My wife is always amazed. How can you do all these things for free? So we do a lot of things for free. We give advice for free, and we sit on committees for free and evaluate things for free. That's the academic model, more or less everywhere in the world.
So you can get more revenue from patient, from patent, from your expertise or teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the last question about academia is there any barrier about nationality, language, or age when applying for academic position in general and in particular in France?
So I must say the French system is, because it is a national concours, a national competition, it's extremely equal. It is independent of nationality, independent of sex, independent of background or of color. The CNRS and the university employ people across all nationalities, all backgrounds. I really think it's a system that tries to look for scientific excellence and teaching excellence rather than any other criteria. There is no positive discrimination. We do not recruit people because they're from minority groups. It's not done. This is done in some countries. In France, in academia, this is not the case. But there are people from all walks of life and all backgrounds. And you do not have to be French. I am not French, but I am paid by the French government to work in a university. What you do have to be able to do, and I don't know if you've had this, Mai, is that to survive in France, you need to learn French. Most of the teaching is in French, and but again, if they are giving you a job for life, paid by the French government, it's normal that they expect you to be integrated into French life. And part of that is learning the language. So you will have to learn the language. Many presentations and many lectures and much of what you have to do in France is in English, because English is the scientific language. So nearly everyone around me speaks at least 2 languages. Many people speak 3 languages. It's extremely diverse. And again, I have not seen any discrimination. I know there's a lot of discussion about this. I have not seen discrimination against women. In my institute, half of the people are women, more than half are women. They're excellent scientists, excellent teachers, and the head of my university is a woman. So I really think it's a system that tries not to have cultural or sexual biases in recruitment.
Oh, that's great to hear about it. So
that's my opinion, and when me and my colleagues, when we see examples that do not respect other people's backgrounds or cultures, then we have tried to speak out against it.
Yeah, right. We definitely need more people like you in the academia. So to conclude, the job is tough, but it's rewarding.
Definitely, yeah.
If you have the guts, so you just go for it. If you have the scientific, you need to have scientific excellence in exchange for freedom, creative freedom, and the job security.
Do you know the hardest part, the hardest thing about this job, Mai, is you need to, the determination has to come from you. This is the hardest part about this job, is that because you won't get paid better if you publish better, you won't get, there's no financial rewards, there's very little prestige reward. The motivation has to come from you, and this is probably the hardest thing about the job. It's
Right.
all the ideas have to come from you, the ideas and the innovation and the determination and the rigor, everything has to come from you.
Thank you very much for the advice and your sharing.